um, and just a student in general, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out my work-life balance and studying balance, and like, um, there was a time where I was working two jobs at nights and going to school during the day, and was sleeping a minimal of 6 hours, and was really starting to see declines in my memory, as well as my sight, my alertness, and really was just feeling very weak. And I often found myself falling asleep in class, and having have lots of conversations with different counselors in my professions because of the sleep debt. So I think it's something that is not often um, given enough attention as it should. And so I'm gonna use that to kind of like lead into this next question. And so to kind of talk about the students in the public in at Grand Rapids Public School System. So here's the question. Some studies are concerned that like this younger generation lives a lifestyle that's concerned more so about like social media and different distractions that are accessible to them, whether it be video games or social media, where they spend a lot of time focused on those things and not really prioritizing their sleep to kind of like always be up to date on what's going on, being aware of like the different bits of information that are out there. And this even happens for adults as well. We find ourselves with our phones in our hands when we're in bed, or not prioritizing, getting that sleep. And so I wanted to ask if what your all's opinions are on that, as well as is getting less than 8 hours of sleep a major issue? And if so, how detrimental can that be to us? I know we so yeah.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like a bell-shaped curve in terms of how many hours of sleep that a typical young adult needs. They found that even for some people, just getting 7 hours of sleep, adults can have just 7 hours of sleep and still function pretty well. It's like I think there was a research study University of Cincinnati that the golden spot somewhere, it's like 7 to 8 hours of sleep is where an adult should have. And so young adults, children, college students, should be getting that amount, ideally close to 8 hours, but 7 hours can be okay too. And but generally speaking, less than 7 hours can be felt to be probably not ideal, and it's all relative, right? So I mean, it can go at individual basis. So someone who's more tired or maybe not be able to focus as well, and they're only getting 6 hours of sleep, well, it may be related to that reason that they're only getting 6 hours of sleep. Whereas some people are more resilient and able to get maybe 6.5 hours of sleep and still be fine. So this is just like kind of an overarching average that I'm telling you, but individually people can be even short sleepers or long sleepers. But to go to your point though, as Aaron already has mentioned, and that definitely sleep debt is a huge problem in our society, and it is unfortunately driven by social media and my experience seeing kids. I would say the over 50% of the time, the reason why the kids or teenagers, from school age to high school to college, maybe not be getting enough sleep is because they have that device in their hand. And unfortunately, I'm not a millennial, or I guess I'm not. I mean, so what the term is now, post-millennial generation. So I can't relate to this generation, and I'm just speaking from my own ancient days of living in the 90s, I guess. But yeah, but I definitely see that this device plays a huge role in our society, in our young society, and like you said, Miguel, this is this now society generation, feeling they have to be on that device, definitely is cutting into their sleep, and I'm just, I wish I knew the answer to fix that problem, but I don't normally just say we have to somehow reduce that, cut that down earlier, but that light, not only is just that information, but the main thing is the light from that device can definitely trigger our ability to impact our ability to fall asleep properly. That the light is it's almost like a flashlight, that just penetrates our eyes, and of course goes to our brain, and then makes it harder for our brain to fall asleep well. So yeah, definitely it's definitely the media content that's keeping kids, but also the light aspect that also causes people not to sleep well. And so this is a huge issue, and it is part of our culture of this, where we are living in 2022. And yeah, I wish I had an answer of how to deal with this, but yeah, it is something that needs to be addressed. And I apologize with that. I do need to probably step away. Sorry, I'm really.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for your time and sharing what you've been able to share. Definitely, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and I can try to come back at 5:30 if you guys are still on at that time too.
Yeah, we will. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Yeah. So, Miss Nicole or Miss White, do you all have anything that you would kind of like to contribute to that conversation about this younger generation, as well as just the generation that's before us, just spending like a lot of time not prioritizing their sleep as they should? How do you all feel about that? And is there any data that you've kind of discovered or studies or anything like that kind of that kind of correlate to that?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts. So I think kind of agree with Dr. Holt talking about taking the phone to bed and how the light impacts us. And I think it's also kind of the loss of time. I think we probably all had the experience of going on Instagram or Facebook, and we say we're going to just be on there a few minutes, and then before you know it, it's a half an hour. So that can really just the platforms itself encourage you to be on it for longer and longer. So that can really eat into your sleep if you say you're going to scroll for a few minutes before you go to sleep. It's very rarely actually a few minutes. So I think that's where kind of sleep hygiene comes in, and that's kind of just your general habits around bedtime, wake time that facilitate sleep. And making it a priority, because I think getting on the phone is kind of a default unless you're intentional about not being on your phone and not looking at screens. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to actively decide, because it doesn't really happen naturally, especially in our culture. It's much more normal to not get enough sleep. And then if you tell someone, oh yeah, I sleep 8 hours every night, their eyes will get big and be like, how do you do that? So I think kind of being intentional about that sleep hygiene, about having this consistent bedtime and wake time, being intentional about what things you do before the bed, intentionally putting the phone away, not taking it with you to bed, plugging it in somewhere you can't reach it from the bed, and all those kind of little things can help curb the impact of that on sleep.
Okay, yeah. So I can go ahead and go to the next question. So I'm sorry, I'm having eye issues. I'm sorry. So should families kind of utilize different sleep aids or sleep medications, or like if you all have like any opinions or knowledge on different things? I know people who utilize like melatonin to help them sleep, and there's just all types of different things out there on whether or not people should utilize this on a consistent basis, on if it's something that should just be used kind of temporarily, or if it should be used at all unless like severe like sleep that is like being being shown. So just curious on if you all have any like expertise or knowledge or any opinions on like things such as like, you know, melatonin and other sleep aids. So
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Miss White.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna add, I think as far as kind of specific recommendations, that would generally come from your medical doctor. So if you're having concerns about your sleep, it's been kind of a consistent issue. Maybe your efforts to improve your sleep is not working. You've kind of already tried maybe some of the things I mentioned earlier. That would be something important to talk about with your doctor or your child's pediatrician. And they would be able to give you more guidance on what to try, and not just what to try, but how and when, and kind of all the specifics on what to do. And then they will also be the ones to specifically diagnose you with a sleep disorder, because they have more understanding of kind of those specific guidelines. And then that would kind of direct them toward what things to have you try. And then they'd also be able to kind of track with you with, okay, you tried something, it didn't work. Okay, what would be the next thing, and kind of walk you through those phases. Of course, a lot of it is over the counter, like melatonin. You can just go to any pharmacy or Walmart to get that and try that if you would like. But I'm in favor of kind of getting direct guidance on kind of how to use those in the safest way, and that'll be most effective for you specifically and for your teenagers.
So oops, I'm not sure if that's my mic or somebody else's. But so as far as like so we're putting on this conversation for parent universities dealing with the students, and so like the sleep, as far as like how it impacts them being able to deal with different coping situations, dealing with like navigating school, their parents and or family, friends. How do you think that lack of sleep contributes to them, like from a social standpoint? Do you think it affects their behavior as far as like trying to being willing and open to like talk about different things?
Yeah, so I think, Miguel, like we've been talking about over the past like 30 to 40 minutes, is that sleep, nutrition, and overall mental well-being all go hand in hand, right? So if we're not getting, if children or youth or even adults are not getting the proper, eating the proper diet and getting the right amount of sleep or the necessary amount of sleep for them, it's going to skew the ability to regulate their emotions. Um, Proper sleep is so important, and I think sleep um, goes hand in hand with, our ability to our brain functioning. And so if we're not allowing ourselves to be restored at night when we are, you know, behaving with other people throughout the day, we're not going to have what we need to be present in school, in relationships and this could be relationships with parents, relationships with friends, relationships with teachers. We're not present because our brain is not functioning the way that it needs to, because we haven't given it a chance to be at rest. So
And to kind of piggyback off of that, kind of like you mentioned, and I think Dr. Holt mentioned earlier, so kind of that emotional regulation, that ability to kind of think rationally and make good decisions, judgment, decision-making skills. All of those can become impaired when we're not getting enough sleep. And then I think also important, a lot of people are constantly in sleep debt. So sometimes I think we get used to a normal that's not optimal. So we may not even realize that we're operating less than our capacity would be if we were getting enough sleep. And I think that can happen with teenagers as well. We might kind of think teenagers are just moody because their hormones are all over the place. And some of that might just be because they never get enough sleep, or their schedule is all over the place. They're one schedule during the week and it's completely flipped every weekend, and then they're back and forth. Um, so kind of it impacts every part of life. And it's really I don't know that there's anything that isn't impacted by not getting enough sleep. So that's in kind of, if you're noticing a difference in how you're functioning or how your kids are functioning, that's kind of a easy thing to kind of check in on. Are they getting enough rest? Let's address that first and see how that impacts them moving forward.
Okay. I think I just have one more question, and so it kind of like touches on all that we've kind of discussed and over this like session, and it's really to just kind of address like a current issue that we've been dealing with, is the pandemic. And so just curious, how do you think the pandemic has kind of impacted people's ability to work through their sleep schedule and their sleep debt, and finding, quality sleep?
I think I like to think of the pandemic kind of in two different ways. So the pandemic kind of added a lot of things to our lives. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety and worry that came with COVID in and of itself. There was a lot of grief and loss as people dealt with loved ones or family, friends passing away. And then along with that, kind of a lot of people not being able to have closure or typical grieving processes when those losses happen, because of not being able to have funerals and things like that. There were kind of huge changes in schedules with quarantines, people losing jobs, financial insecurity. So all these kind of extra things that got added to people's lives, which is kind of just all different types of stress. And I think we've all had even maybe minor stressors that we didn't sleep as good the night after, or maybe we're anticipating a stressor the next day and we didn't sleep as well. So even if we had a good sleep schedule, we set aside enough time to sleep, our actual sleep might not have been as good because of those extra stressors. And then the pandemic also had, on the other side of that, I like to think of it as kind of a magnifying glass on things that were already there. So there are a lot of health disparities and economic inequalities, systemic racism. All these things were there before the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of magnified and kind of exacerbated and made those issues more obvious and more apparent. So a lot of people in marginalized or disadvantaged communities were already dealing with kind of all those disparities. So they have less resources to manage and deal with all the extra things that the pandemic brought along. So all of those things kind of impact our well-being day to day and our sleep. If you don't have a lot of resources to manage all those stressors, insomnia or low sleep quality is kind of one of the first ways it can start to impact you. Before there's anxiety, before depression, before all those things, you're likely to start seeing your sleep not being as good. And that's kind of for all age groups, including our teenagers as well.
Yeah, I just like to. I think I have like an echo going on with what Dr. Scott said, as far as the disparities and systemic racism impacting just our experience. So that magnifying glass. I think that children of color specifically, with the pandemic happening and having to do online classes, right? So their experience of online class may be different than a non child of color, as far as maybe not having access to Wi-Fi, so having to be creative with being on, online classes, or having parents who are not in the house because they have to go to work still because they may have been essential workers, or in a non-person of color household, the parents might be in the home so that they can help their students while they're online classes. Being there to wake them up in the morning and keep them on a regular routine. So eating breakfast, being able to eat lunch and be online class and be present in the class, whereas other students, students of color may not have had that same experience. So they're in their bed, doing their online class instead of being able to be sitting at a desk at home, on their online class. So that those things also could have had a great impact on students of color, when we talk about the pandemic. And then also, as far as just sleep in general, I think, for me, I think a lot of people like working from home, right? Because it's convenient. We can do things from home and we don't have to actually leave our houses. But unfortunately, home is supposed to be somewhere where you can restore, where you can rest, where you can separate home from work, right? But with COVID, we had to enmesh those things together. So where do you go to reset? Where do you go to restore? Because everything is together. We don't have to wake up in the morning and eat breakfast, take a nice shower, get dressed, and go out of the house. We can just kind of roll over in our beds and be right at work, or be right, in our classroom. So if we're keeping up that routine, the children are on their computers doing their schoolwork, and then they get on their iPads and they get on their cell phones. These screens are there 24/7, and there's no time to really just sit in their bed, relax, get optimal sleep. So COVID had a major impact, on all of us as far as getting restorative sleep and proper nutrition, but more specifically persons of color, because of those things that Dr. Scott talked about, all those things being highlighted, because we don't have access to the same resources as other individuals.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. Um, and so I'm going to and thank you both for that, for sharing that. I'm gonna open up the floor for like any questions. Um, if anybody out there may have some, and so we can kind of set aside some time for that. Um, so, well, if there aren't any questions, I want to thank you both again for
I
coming
think
and
there is
speaking.
a question in the chat.
Oh,
Yeah,
is there
we
one?
do just have one question. I'll just
Oh,
read it for y'all. Okay, so it says, how do high stress jobs or high stress lives affect sleep?
I think stress in general impacts sleep. So I think when you are dealing with a life situation that causes stress, or you have a job that's just inevitably stressful, I think you have to be a lot more intentional about relaxation, decompressing, and figuring out how to wind down at the end of your day, and being more intentional about good sleep hygiene, because it's less likely for you to get quality sleep just naturally. Because our bodies, especially when we're in a lot of stress, we sometimes have to kind of intentionally and purposeful teach our body how to calm down, how to force our muscles to relax and our heart rate to go down and our breathing to slow down. And just getting in bed and laying down doesn't necessarily automatically start that process. So when you have dealing with a lot of stress or have a high stress job, it's kind of more imperative that you do those things intentionally.
All right. Oh, did we get a second question? Oh, yes, you said thank you. All right. There aren't any more questions. Once again, I want to thank you both for showing up, attending, and being a part of this conversation. And as we look forward to planning out more discussions around this and getting more information and more stuff, we definitely invite you back. And are truly just thankful for your time. And so if anybody has like any questions they want to email me to, email me. You can email me at miguel.gonzalez@grahi.org, and we can try to answer those for you as they come. So thank you all.
Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
Thank you so much to both of you, to all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Have a good day.